Hello, folks. Killface of Balor here. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you a bit about a comment I got the other day and to do maybe a bit of a real life quest walkthrough, right? An explanation of the tears of the mustache. Someone told me the other day that I seem quite mature. Yes, I run a gaming channel on YouTube. How mature of me. But really, what it is, I think, that gives that impression, and what I told them, is that it's the mustache. You know, it's about 125 maturity, maybe 300 adulting ability or so. Um, so, much like much of the gear that you're used to, right, there are a similar set of tiers with the stash. Um, so first, right, you have your minor and even your lesser stashes that really people are not impressed to get, and for the most part, you really should either toss them or vendor them. Not that they have much real world value if you vendor them. And here we're talking about as far as a minor stash, we're talking about anything from the first wisps of being able to grow some facial hair, maybe legitimate whiskers, if you will, just thin wisps of hair, up to maybe the beginnings of a creep stash, right? The little couple of patches here that really kind of scares everyone away, right? It's sort of like when you click on the noob and they're using, lesser ring of skewer or something, and you think to yourself, what are you doing? Wouldn't you be better off just not having that in general? There are some people that can pull it off, right? There are your lesser rings of Shadow Strike that seem good for the noob. And we do have to progress through the tiers, right? So everybody needs them. So we'll talk a bit about how to do that, but I wanted to give a bit of a rundown on a couple of the tiers to start with. And then we get to the Mystic Stash, which is where you start to be less surprised that people would wear it, right? That's where you're starting to see the whole lip covered, but maybe it's a bit on the wispy side anyway, right? Mystics are sort of known for that. A very small, like Fu Manchu sort of stash would work with that description, and even a full traditional, I'm going to say walrus style stash would work. If it were basically, if you could still see a decent amount of skin underneath the stash, if it's not really taking its place beneath the nose as it should. It should be the prominent feature of the upper lip if you're going to wear one. And let's take a moment to look at the types so that you can follow what I'm saying, right? The Fu Manchu stash most people are used to. It's the wispy thing, but it can come down and be quite long. Like the rat that trained the Ninja Turtles, right? He had a stash that was a trademark. It wasn't terrible on him at all, but that's because he had a Fu Manchu stash, and even in the higher tiers, they don't have the bulk. It's okay. Some things, they lack bulk, and yet they're still good, still offer legitimate stats, enhance your appearance, that sort of thing. A mustache, aside from the obvious tactical advantage, as Master Ken put it, should also offer some fashion sense, if you will. All right. So then we're moving on to the more well-known ones. Obviously, there is the handlebar, which is what I'm wearing now. And that's basically just goes across the lip and then curls. Right? We have an English stash that it's sort of like this, but it goes straight out. Or almost straight out. Instead of curling over, it sticks out to either side. All right. Then you have your Bulgarian, which I'm more of an expert, I think, on the handlebar, having more experience with it. But I believe the Bulgarian is more down this way, right? And then it curls. but not necessarily as far as a handlebar would. More, let's see if we can turn this into a Bulgarian. I don't think so. No, I can't. Oh well. And then you have the ones that are already well known. The Fu Manchu is the one I keep referencing. But, or like an extreme version of the handlebar where you look like you should be in a mariachi band, where you have a particularly long amount of width and then a huge loop or some such thing. Right. And some of those can violate the scaling, some of the descriptors I'll give for the different tiers. And then you have your walrus stash. I feel that that's more of a tanking stash, but I'll go into some detail on that later. And the walrus is just sort of the natural, straight over the lip mustache. And a lot of people who see that natural walrus stash think to themselves, I don't have the face for a mustache, or more likely, I don't have the hair for a mustache. I don't have that lip hair. Give your lip a chance. For those of you ladies who may be watching this, ignore that last piece of advice, please. The usefulness of a stash on even now, right, in the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, even nowadays, the addition of a stash is not really something that enhances the build of most females. And if you happen to be one of the people who has no idea how you identify, I don't know how to help with that. I'm sorry. I can only offer build advice on things I understand. And I don't mean that as an insult at all. I just have no particular set of advice I can give. And for those of you who don't feel that you fall distinctly into either gender, we're not getting in a gender discussion any more than we already have this year. At least not at this point in the video. Yes, so let's move on from that, and we'll just say if you find that this advice helps you, take it to heart. Build on it, use it. If it does not help you, that's okay. You can even dislike the video if you want, although that will probably make me frown. But yes, feel free to disregard it. And for those of you whom it helps, please offer some likes to support, the stash as we go into 2019. Okay, moving on from there. We've covered the minor stash, gotten a little bit into the lesser stash, right? The lesser stash is your full-blown creep stash. It's also a there but patchy stash. There are people who don't grow the entirety of the stash, and that can be a bit odd, and that tends to be towards the lesser side. But let's move right along to... Oh, we covered this lesser. We were covering Mystic. Sorry. Yes, the Mystic stash, which is where you start to see you've got a full-blown stash, but it's not really filled in to the full extent. Then you have your greater mustache. Your greater mustache is a full stash, right? It doesn't necessarily have the curl that the handlebar has. I mean, it might start to have a curl, and my curls are not truly full. We'll get into that in a moment. But the greater stash is respectable, right? You get a bit of respect, maybe a bit of maturity off of it, perhaps even a little adulting ability. And the greater stash starts to look well-groomed, although it doesn't always have to be. You could get away with a not so well-groomed stash, and the walrus is always going to be the style that falls outside of what we're talking about as far as advice. Most of this applies primarily to the handlebar. The walrus does not require any product, so no upkeep cost, which is great. It does make health regen and energy regen a little difficult due to the fact that it can obscure the mouth, making it slightly more difficult to eat. But that's okay. It's okay. The benefits, if you can truly grow a good one, often outweigh that. So, your greater stash, on the one hand, you might think more like a Tom Selleck stash. On the other hand, Selleck has a truly unique stash, right? He has the teal stash, if you will. It's not white, right? It's not super out of the ordinary, except that it's the only one, right? It was in the inaugural class of the International Mustache Hall of Fame. It has its own Facebook page and its own Twitter account. It's quite the stash. According to an interview I saw with Selleck, it actually has its own agent separate from his agent, and they're required to get scripts for Blue Bloods a week early because the mustache would like to read over them beforehand to help enhance its performance. Okay, so we'll get into exceptions later, but the greater stash, it's a full mustache. The grand stash is really what I'm working on now, right? It's got its curls, or in the English, it's got the straight out. In the Bulgarian, it comes down around the edges of the mouth and starts to come out. That is where people really start to notice, I feel, the stash is different from the average stash. And it should help people to notice you. It requires more upkeep. Right? It requires some product. You're going to start to need to be actively using maybe some wax. Balms are a good thing. Beard balms. Look at the formulas. Formulas that have beeswax will have a minor bit of hold with them as well. And we'll do maybe a different video if this is well received on the upkeep of the grand and above sorts of stashes. Now, let's look at the mighty stash. The thing with a mighty mustache that helps to differentiate it from a grand stash, in my opinion, is the bulk. You start to get out on the ends some bulkiness, right? Some body to the stash. It should be noticeable. It presents itself from quite some ways away, right? The style is there, but it looks sort of intimidating, if you will. It will still enhance your approachability, because stashes do that. A well-maintained mustache will get you a lot of hellos. Also a lot of compliments directly on the mustache. You know how it is. When you start to get good gear, people examine your gear and then they say, nice gear, instead of, good morning. So that starts to happen around the grand level, but especially around the mighty. People should notice. Then we come into the majestic stash. The majestic stash requires some style. It's sleek, it has plenty of body, but it also has plenty of length, right? You can see it from a long ways away. It's a prominent feature, just not of the upper lip, but of the face in general, right? It enhances the entire look, and you can build a look around it, right? You can see my look is a little built around my stash, but it's an overall look. With the majestic stash, it's a very large, prominent feature, even just in the real estate that it requires. And it really does need to start to look good. And with the walrus, it's going to start to go over that top lip and start to get involved with the rest of the face, maybe a little down over the bottom lip, that sort of thing. And that's why I start to call that more of a tank stash, right? When we get to the higher tiers, people with a stash in a walrus style, instead of looking more mature, will look more solid, if you will, more rugged. You don't get in a fight with a man with a royal walrus mustache. You just don't. He looks intimidating just from the stash itself. Jamie Heineman is a good example of what I would have said is a mighty to majestic walrus stash. When you start to get into royal, now you're getting into those higher tiers that start to scale up progressively. Royal stashes are more seen by their excessiveness. It needs excessive bulk, excessive length. We're talking royalty here, right? And really, you need to be, at that point, working on the rest of your look, because there's a danger that the royal stash will wear you rather than being content to be worn. So you need the stats, the strength, right? And overall vitality of build, if you will, to wear it so that it looks worn rather than it looks as if it's wearing you. You need the dexterity to handle that stash, right? And you have to do so suavely, right? And then we start to look at the Imperial Stash. The Imperial Stash, right? It is more about the group bonus, the presence, if you will, that comes with a truly impressive stash. The Imperial Stash is going to command respect, right? People will believe that you are a more solid piece of society simply because your mustache is that commanding and that impressive, right? So the Imperial Stash really sets you apart, puts you in charge, right? They will assume that you know what you're doing because your mustache is that impressive. And you start to get bonuses that overflow into your ability to lead groups, right? And then we come across the Godly Stash. Now, the Godly Stash, that's what we're all after, right? We want that one godly item. It's very rare, very rare. And I would say that Selleck's mustache falls into the godly category, right? It has a personality of its own. People will be tempted to address your mustache separately from addressing you. But it's okay. It's okay. If you possess the level, the achievement to wear the Godly Stash, there is a group aura that happens, right? With a truly godly mustache, people who come near you should be better people because they are near you, right? Men who come near your godly mustache should be more manly, right? If you walk into a gym with a godly mustache, you should expect that every man in that gym has an increased maximum bench press simply because they're in the presence of that stash, right? Now, this is where we deal with what happens with other genders, with people who are unclear on how to identify themselves, right? So, first, the mustache at the godly level, even going into 2019, is going to clarify gender roles in a way that brings life and happiness to everyone there, right? It doesn't detract from anyone, right? Women in the presence of a godly mustache should also be finding themselves better at the things that they've chosen to do, at their roles in life, right? Gender roles are enforced, but not in a way that intimidates the one rather than the other, right? It brings out the things where they shine, right? So you should see that women feel more empathetic, right? They're more able to look and see the needs of others, and more than that, they're more able to look and fill those needs. Not because it's their job to wait on men, if you will, right? But because they have a gift for that in general, right? And I don't mean to get, again, into some giant gender discussion, but we're talking about something impressive here, okay? In the presence of a godly mustache, we should have it so that people in general are more loving, more caring, more aware of each other, able to lift more weight, right? More hardworking, more dedicated to what they do. Okay? People who are unclear on where they stand in life, no matter what that is, what job you'd like to do, or whether or not you should really identify as a cow. Don't identify as a cow, okay? That should very easily be solved in the presence of a godly mustache, right? There should be more clarity, and they should feel willing to ask the wearer of a godly mustache for such clarity. It should be obvious, exuding out, right? Everyone who comes into your presence should be enhanced mentally, physically, right? They should feel impressive. Your entire group should be intimidating, right? That is what tips the scales between being able to do those 5-star tasks and those 6-star tasks solo, right? That is what allows you to go out and solo boss, not only because you yourself are boosted, but because if anyone were to join your party, they would be all the better at what they do, simply for being in the presence of that stash. Now, for those of you just setting out on this quest, here are some general questing guidelines. First of all, nobody wants to go through the early times, right? The minor stash times. Now, there are some things you can do to make those times better. What I did, and I actually like this approach, is that I just went for the full beard, right? I went for the full beard, and it let the stash grow out less noticeably. And you can actually separate the stash from the beard by, right, you go behind it. I don't know if you can see this. You go behind the hair at your lip. You pull it out like this. You comb the beard hair down, and then you let this out. Sorry. It's not good for the curl necessarily, but it does define the stash. So you can start to define it. And the big thing you want to do is wax it early as it starts to grow in. And what this will do is it will train the hairs. So most of you who think you can't do this, you have mustache hairs that go straight down, like that, kind of, except mine are already sort of trained. The wax takes that hair and it pushes it to the side. This groove in the middle, it's called a Cupid's bow, and people try and trim that in. Never trim it in, right? This comes when you have the length for these hairs to sweep over and take their places in the group. Most, and I got this from a fellow YouTuber and quite the expert on facial hair, George Bruno, aka the Sultan of Silver. Most of your problems with beards and with mustaches can be solved with time and with length. Let it grow. Learn to comb it. Learn to love it. So the other thing that you can do is basically, if you're going to suffer through just having the mustache, start with some challenge like Movember, where everyone is socially required to accept it, right? Now, I've been blessed with a reduced cooldown on facial hair respawn. Through school, I saw that more as a negative than as a positive, having to shave all the time. But now I see it's helpful to get that length, right? It's going to be, hopefully, what helps me make that jump from that start of a grand stash into the start of a mighty stash. And really, as you can see, it gets more wispy out here at the end. I need these center hairs to be able to grow all the way into that curl if I want the bulk that's going to take me over that edge into the next tier. So don't trim. Train, and nurture. All right? So, anyway, yes, there's some general tips as you set out on your quest for that ever so elusive godly mustache. And I hope that this helps you along your journey. Happy hunting, and may you be most profitable in your endeavors. I'll see you in the next video.